Today, we're diving into the hidden rules that kind of run our world, the unspoken logic behind pretty much every decision, from a big corporate merger all the way down to a lioness hunting its prey. So welcome to your guide on the art and science of strategic thinking. I mean, really think about that for a second. Asking for a raise, going on a first date, or even just trying to merge into traffic. What's the answer? Well, it's pretty much always, right? Your best move almost always depends on what you think the other person is going to do. And this is where it gets really cool. This idea of interdependence, it's not just a human thing. Life, when you get right down to it, is this massive, tangled up set of strategic games. And the incredible framework we have for understanding all of it? It's called game theory. So where do we even begin with something that big? Well, we start with the classic model, the foundation for everything else that comes after, a game of pure, cold, calculated strategy. Okay, so the traditional view of game theory, it starts with this one huge assumption. It pictures a world full of perfectly rational players. Some economists call them homo economicus. In this world, everyone is just trying to get the absolute best outcome for themselves. And they know that everyone else is doing the exact same thing. It's a world of pure, logical self-interest. To really see how this plays out, let's look at a beautifully simple game that actually reveals a super deep dilemma about cooperation. It's called the Stag Hunt. Okay, so imagine you and a partner are hunters. If you work together, if you cooperate to hunt a stag, you both get a massive reward, let's say 4 points each. Awesome. But here's the catch. At any moment, either one of you could ditch the plan and hunt a little hare instead for a smaller but guaranteed payoff. The risk is so clear. If you go for the big prize, the stag, but your partner bails on you, you get absolutely nothing. This is a pure game of trust. And this just lays out the central tension perfectly. Yeah, working together to hunt the stag gives you the biggest reward, but it requires total trust. If you even have a tiny suspicion that your partner might play it safe and go for the hare, then your best move is to also go for the hare, just to make sure you don't go home with nothing. The best possible outcome is fragile, but that safe, guaranteed outcome is always so tempting. So, that's the rational model. But what happens when we take these neat and tidy ideas out of a thought experiment and throw them into the messy, unpredictable real world of, well, nature? Right? The whole classical model assumes we're all these hyper-rational supercomputers. But animals aren't sitting there running payoff matrices in their heads. Their strategies aren't chosen. They're basically encoded into their DNA. They evolve. And this brings us to evolutionary game theory. In this version, the game is played out over countless generations. A successful strategy doesn't get you more points, it gets you more offspring. The payoff here is just survival and reproduction. Strategies aren't calculated, they are selected for by nature itself. I mean, think about a conflict over food. An animal can be a hawk, always aggressive, always fighting. Or it can be a dove, always backing down from a fight. So which one is better? Well, in a world full of peaceful doves, being a hawk is fantastic. You win every time. But in a world packed with aggressive hawks, being a hawk is actually really dangerous. The best strategy is always changing based on what everyone else is doing. It's a dynamic game that's constantly being reshaped by evolution. And nature has evolved some wildly different ways to win this game. On one hand, you have players like deer mice. They live short lives, they reproduce really early and really often. It's a strategy of high volume. But on the other hand, you have players like giant beech trees. They live for centuries. They pour a ton of resources into every single seed, and they wait a long time to reproduce. That's a strategy of high quality. These two different play styles are known as R strategists and K strategists. The R strategists, like our mice, are all about playing a numbers game. Short life, quick reproduction, tons of offspring. They're built for productivity. The K strategists, like the beech tree, they're playing the long game, investing a whole lot in just a few offspring to give them the best possible chance of survival. It's a classic trade-off, right? Productivity versus efficiency. Two totally different, but equally successful ways to win. Okay, so we've looked at the perfectly rational player and the evolutionary player. But that brings us to the most complex, the most unpredictable, and frankly, the most fascinating player of all. Us. Because, let's be honest, we are not perfect logic machines. This behavioral human on the right, that's a much more accurate picture.
We're driven by all sorts of cognitive biases, we're totally influenced by social pressures and ideas about fairness, and we are often, as the experts say, predictably irrational. We don't just try to maximize our gain. A lot of the time, we're just trying to avoid a loss.
And this is the absolute core idea behind something called prospect theory, which was pioneered by these geniuses, Kahneman and Tversky. And it was a total game changer. It says we don't think in terms of absolute wealth, we think in gains and losses from wherever we're standing right now. And here's the kicker. The psychological sting of losing $100 is way more powerful than the pleasure of gaining $100. This loss aversion just completely warps our decisions in really profound ways.
And it gets even weirder. We are also just terrible at judging probability. We buy lottery tickets, wildly overestimating that tiny, tiny chance of winning, while at the same time, we might not properly plan for something that has a really high chance of happening. Our internal risk calculator is just systematically broken, and that changes how we play every single game in our lives. So we have the rational player, the evolutionary player, and the predictably irrational human player. What happens when we start to combine all these models? Well, we get the tools to understand and build the incredibly complex systems of today. We're talking about the cutting edge of science and technology. In the world of artificial intelligence, game theory is absolutely essential. It's how we train multiple AIs to actually work together or compete on complex problems. It's how we get swarms of autonomous robots to coordinate, and it's how we design video game opponents that feel genuinely smart and strategic. It's basically the rulebook for creating artificial social intelligence. And in medicine, the applications are literally life-saving. Researchers are now treating cancer as an evolutionary game. They see a tumor not as one thing, but as a population of competing cells. And this leads to something called evolutionary therapies that try to manage, not just obliterate, the cancer to stop resistant cells from taking over. It's also used to model how diseases spread and how strategies like vaccination campaigns can become stable winning moves for a whole population. And of course, it is absolutely everywhere in society. It helps us understand the wild psychology of stock markets, predict how things like new teaching technologies might get adopted in schools, and it even helps us tackle the biggest questions of all. Why do we cooperate? Where does our sense of fairness even come from? Game theory gives us the tools to model how these fundamental things can just emerge from the interactions between individuals. Which really brings us to our final question. We've gone from simple two-player games to these massive global networks and AI agents. The games we're playing are getting infinitely more complex. So are the players. Are we learning to overcome our own biases, our own selfish instincts, to find better ways to play the most important game of all? You know, the one where we can all win together? That, I think, is the challenge ahead.